What's up guys, Ethan here with Living Off the Land, and this morning I'm going out bluegill fishing here at our farm pond in South Dakota. And if I catch any, I'm planning to build a Dakota fire pit to cook them on. If you've never heard of that, stick around, it should be a good time, and I'm very excited. Bluegill are really good eating. In my opinion, they're probably one of the most underutilized, underappreciated game fish in all of North America, and they're very abundant. They're really fun to catch. They put up a good fight, and they get pretty big, and like I said, they're really delicious. So that's what we're going for today, is bluegill. Hopefully we get some, and it should be a good time. So let's get to it. We also have largemouth bass in this pond, and they get obviously a lot bigger than the bluegill. That's usually what I go for when I come down here fishing, but today we're going for bluegill. For strictly eating purposes, bluegill definitely tastes better in my opinion. I don't have anything against eating largemouth. I do it a lot and they're fine. They're honestly good eating, but bluegill are just a little bit better. So that's what we're targeting today, and hopefully we get some. In terms of setup today, I'm just using this tiny little jig head here and a sliding bobber. I have some night crawlers, and live bait is not necessary for catching panfish like bluegill, but it definitely goes a long ways to helping select for that. And so I'm using live bait this morning, and yeah, again, not that you have to, but it's very valuable. I think it's a good way to get the bluegill. So let's rig up a hook here and get going. Haha, little guy. You know, this guy is so small, I think we're gonna throw him back. We're gonna try to get some little bit bigger bluegill. You know, he'd be fine eating, but he's really small. So we're gonna throw him back and go for his bigger brother. He left us our worm even, to his credit. Haha, this guy's even smaller. Oh, there's a big snapping turtle out there. He just surfaced. They're like the nuclear subs of the pond. They just come up to see what the deal is. We're gonna throw this guy back. He's a little on the small side. And just like that, the snapper's gone. Here we go. The little guy. He's going back in the drink. There we go. Little guy. Man, these guys are all so little. There we go. That's more like it. Yeah, it's not a huge guy, but he'll eat really well. Nice. This guy is definitely bigger than a lot of those other ones I've been catching. A lot of them have kind of been in that same caliber. They're really small. This guy, he's on the smaller side. I mean, they'll definitely get a lot bigger than this, but this guy will eat really well. So we're keeping this guy. It's crazy, you know? I've been out here fishing for maybe a half an hour, and I've probably caught at least 20 fish, if not more, 25 maybe, and they've all been really little. This is actually just the second fish I've kept, so we're gonna keep going, see if we can't get 3 keepers, and I've been having a blast though. This bluegill fishing is really fast action. You know, every cast pretty much you're bringing a fish back, it seems like, and it's really a blast. So yeah, we're gonna get back to it and see if we can't catch another keeper. This guy's pretty little, but he'll cook up just fine. We're gonna keep him. Well, there we go. I've been fishing for like an hour maybe, and so these are the 4 bluegill that I kept today. They're definitely on the smaller side as far as bluegill go. They were the 4 nicest ones I caught today, but they'll be really good eating. Honestly, these smaller guys are delicious. They'll cook up really well, and for our purposes today, having them be a little bit smaller is gonna be to our advantage, the methods of cooking that we're using today. So let's get these guys cleaned up, get a fire going, and get these guys cooking. 2 of these guys, we're gonna use the baked clay method to cook them, and I'm gonna pick the 2 smaller ones for that. All we'll do is gut them, clean them off good, and that'll be it. And then the other 2, I'm gonna fillet them, but leave the scales on the outsides of the fillets, and we'll use the 2 bigger bluegill for that, and then we're gonna cook those on hot rock in our fire. Alright, so we got one guy gutted here and washed out a little bit. This guy we're gonna fillet just like normal. And bluegill this small can be kind of challenging to fillet, to be honest. You have to be really careful not to accidentally cut through the backbone. There we go. Perfect. And normally you'd leave the skin on, a little tab like that, and then you can fillet the meat off the skin, and then you just, you know, you're left with the meat with no skin on. But since we're cooking this guy on a rock, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut through the skin there. And there we have one of our nice little fillets with the skin on, the scale still on. We'll do the same thing on this other side. And once again, we're just gonna cut right through that little tab of scale there. There we are. Not much meat on these guys, but they'll be perfect. That is almost straight clay. This is exactly the kind of clay we're looking for. And the method of cooking fish that we're gonna try is basically to encase the fish in a layer of this clay, and then you put it into some embers of the fire and it just bakes it. And it's a really great way to cook fish if you don't have any pots or pans, and if you're just out in the bush looking for a way to cook fish besides just spitting it, obviously. All right, just a little bit more. Sweet. And that ought to be plenty for our purposes. This is about as good a place as any to put our Dakota fire hole. The primary cooking hole, make it about 1 to 1.5 feet in diameter and about the same in depth. So 1 to 1.5 feet in depth. And this is gonna be where the fire is, where we're cooking. Now we're gonna dig a second hole pretty much adjacent to this first one, and you wanna figure out the wind direction because the second one is gonna be the air intake, and you want it to be upwind from your cooking hole. So we'll figure out the direction the upwind is and sink our second hole. We're gonna go ahead and sink our second hole, and this one doesn't have to be as big in dimension as the first one. The dimensions don't matter a whole ton, but make it maybe just a little smaller just for ease of digging. And somewhere between 1 foot to even less than that, you can get away with probably 6 inches of kind of a bridge between the two holes, and then we're gonna connect these two together. All right, so we have our second hole sunk. It's about 1 foot in diameter and maybe 1.5 feet deep, and it's pretty close, you know, probably about like 8 inches of a bridge between these two holes. So we have our cooking hole, and again, this is our air intake hole. Now what we're gonna do is tunnel at the bottom of this hole and connect it to this other one. And you want this connecting tunnel to be pretty narrow diameter. You don't want it to be huge, and you want it to be at the bottom of both holes. So if you imagine a cross section, you're digging down, and then at the bottom you're connecting through. So it's kind of this horseshoe shape. You can use a shovel for the start of it, but honestly, pretty quickly the angle is gonna kind of stop you. You can try digging from both sides a little bit with your shovel, but just given the nature of the depth of these holes and the size of the shovel, you're not going to be able to get all the way through like that. So what we're going to do is dig from each side as far as we can, and then switch to using a branch to kind of bore through that tunnel. I have a couple different size sticks here. One's a bigger branch that I broke off, then that'll kind of help bore through. And then even just a small little stick here to do some hand digging. And we're just trying to connect through. All right, so we got this Dakota fire pit dug. The air intake is all ready, and it didn't take long at all. It took maybe 10 minutes all told. You could definitely do it faster than that. So what's up with Dakota fire pits, and why are we using one today? Well, Dakota fire pits have a number of advantages over conventional above ground fire. Probably the main one is protection from the wind. If you sink your fire down into the ground, then no matter how windy it is, you're still gonna be able to get a fire lit and keep it going reasonably well. And that's important here in South Dakota, where it's windy so many days out of the year. This method of fire actually originated here on the Great Plains. The Native Americans would use it, hence the name Dakota fire pit. And yeah, out in the open prairie where it's so windy so often, it was very, very useful for just that one advantage. Another advantage that's really, really good for us today is just the concentration of heat. And it's a really efficient fire. It doesn't take a whole lot of wood to cook a lot of food, and it stays really hot. It's not all this heat that you're losing out the sides like you do in a normal above ground fire, which, you know, isn't a huge deal, but it is an advantage for sure. And honestly, these Dakota fire pits, they almost act like a little rocket stove or a little like camp stove that just has such a concentrated burner and so much heat coming up through that one little area. So these Dakota fire pits are really efficient for cooking purposes. And then the other big reason that people have used these over the years is just for stealth purposes, which we don't care about today, but these are a pretty low profile fire. If you get your flames down below ground level, then they're very low vis. You know, people aren't gonna see your flames from miles away. You know, they're good for night cooking. If you have a fire going at night, sink it down below ground. And then also for smoke dispersion, it's funny, having this extra air intake, they really just disperse the smoke well. And so they're kind of, they're well concealed. The smoke, especially if you locate it right next to a tree, you don't have to. And if you don't have any trees around, which a lot of the Great Plains, you know, the trees are in short supply, but normally these are recommended to be located right next to a tree because the little smoke that does emanate from this is going to be dispersed pretty well up in the leaves of the tree. And from a distance, they're almost non-visible. I mean, the smoke trace is going to be so faint compared to a normal fire above ground where there's going to be a big column of smoke just billowing up, depending on what fuel source you're using. But those are kind of the main reasons that these things are used. They have a long history. Like I said, they originated with the Dakota people here in the Great Plains, and they have been used ever since then. They actually have been a staple of US military field and survival guides since the Vietnam War. There's stories of US GIs using this kind of a fire in the jungles of Vietnam to just stay hidden while they're trying to cook food, dry their clothes out. So try making one of these things for yourself. Cook some fish, cook whatever food you want, and have a good time. You can build any sort of little fire starting structure you want, whether you're a pyramid guy or a log cabin or just kind of a random. Doesn't really matter. Whatever works for you. I'm going to use some true flint and steel, not the magnesium striker bar, but this is a high carbon steel striker that I forged a few years ago out of a piece of springtine from this very grove that I'm in now. And so this was off some old farm implement. I don't remember what it was. And then this is a piece of chert off the farm here too. And so this is a good fire striking stone. The idea is you find a hard, sharp-faced rock like chert here, and you're gonna strike with this steel bar against that, and you're actually trying to shave off little pieces of that steel, and that's what the sparks are, is the molten steel flying off. It gets shaved off this metal bar. So really this striker it's a consumable item, but it just takes so long to shave off an appreciable amount. We are gonna be striking into some little char cloth pieces here. I'll just use one, but this is actually some char cloth I made out of just old white t-shirts that were 100% cotton. Take an old Altoids tin, poke a hole in the top, and put these into the side of the fire. You don't want it to be just so hot that these things turn into nothing, but the idea is you're just charring them so that they're almost just ash. There's hardly anything to them, and they're gonna take a spark really well and hold it long enough for us to transfer to our tinder, which today I'm using some of this rope twine, hemp or jute, any of those natural fiber ropes. You can unravel them and get, you know, down to something like this, and then these guys subsequently you also will unravel and fluff them up nice. And so I've done that already with the length of this fiber, and I've come up with a nice little donut here of really fluffed up good fibrous material. This is going to be an awesome fire holder and kind of our tinder that we're going to just nest our spark into and get this thing started. There we go. Sweet. Now you gotta be careful not to get so excited that you let the thing burn out. All right, that's perfect. You don't want to get so excited that you just feed the thing too much fuel and kill it off. Just gonna go ahead and feed this thing a decent amount of fuel and get a nice bed of coals going down there. This thing's only been burning for like 2 minutes, and you can already see how much heat is just coming up in such a directed, small surface area. So I've been burning this for a little while, feeding it fuel, building up a good bed of coals in there, and now I have 3 a little bit bigger sticks that I'm just gonna kind of feed in, almost like a Siberian log fire on a much smaller scale. I have a couple green sticks here that I'm gonna lay over the fire and go ahead and rig up the grill that we're gonna fry our fish fillets on. So I got those guys laying crosswise there, and those should stay good for quite a while. Those things are green. And then I found this piece of almost like slate or shale out in the grove here. There's some of this just naturally occurring on the farm. This is gonna be perfect for using as a little griddle. I'll go ahead and just kind of brush it off, get it as clean as we care to, and then we'll just toss that right on top here. It is already getting kind of hot, and yeah, it's amazing the amount of heat just radiating directly upward right there. Even just putting that down there was almost kind of difficult. There's so much heat coming up. We're gonna let this sit for a while. We'll keep feeding in fuel and just let our grill heat up, and then we'll go ahead and fry our fish fillets. The thing you have to be a little bit careful about with this shale stuff is that it has a tendency to pop out. This piece, it came off, and I pulled it off over to the side here just to show you guys what kind of a piece can come off that sort of shale. And that's, you know, it's a risky run with any sort of stone that you're heating up. You just have to be really careful. Make sure you're wearing glasses or eye protection. Fillet number 1 is going on the grill. Here comes fillet number 2. These guys are starting to cook through nicely already. I'm just gonna keep feeding fuel to the fire. So our fish has been on maybe for like 5 minutes or so, and it's cooking up really nicely. It's honestly about ready to take off. That was too close. So one of my cooking slats just cooked through actually and started collapsing, but I was able to save the griddle here with the fish on it. So we're just gonna set this to the side, and it's honestly, this first batch is ready to eat, so we're gonna dig into it. There we are. We got our nice bluegill grilled on slate over a Dakota fire pit. I have a little improvised fork here, and we're gonna dig into these guys, see how they are. I left some bones in, so we're gonna have to kind of dig around the bones. Oh yeah, those bones are just gonna come right out. Oh yeah, leaving the bones in like that, you end up saving a lot more meat. There we go. Let's go ahead and clean the bones off like that. We got some nice flaky bluegill here. We're gonna give this a try. That is really good. It's honestly just about finger food at this point. We're gonna try this piece here. That is top notch. Bluegill is so good. You'd think cooking it on the skin like that and how fresh it is that there'd be a really fishy taste. None at all. That is amazing. I'm gonna see if, yeah, so look at that skin. That's so crispy there. I'm honestly just gonna try eating a little bit of the skin. That is surprisingly good. That is crispy, browned. That is really good stuff. Just a straight bluegill skin, scales and all. It might sound crazy. That stuff is really tasty though. I tell you what. That is so good. All right, I'm still eating that first one. It is so good. We're gonna see if we can't just lift the whole thing off like we did that last one. That really worked well. Oh yeah, look at that. It's just separating perfectly. Nice golden brown skin on that one. I'm telling you guys, that skin is really tasty on these guys. It's healthy. There's a lot of good fats and nutrients in the skin of the fish. We'll go ahead and just peel the bones out of this one. Eat them. Wow. That's good. It might look a little questionable, but trust me, it is absolutely delicious. It really tastes good. Some nice flaky white fish there. That is good. It's a pretty elemental way to cook fish, but I tell you what, it gets the job done, and it gets the job done well. Maybe it's just that I'm so hungry, but honestly, that bluegill tastes really good grilled like that, just right on a slate over a fire like this. That is a good way to cook fish. Our slate is remarkably clean after those 2 fish fillets, so we're just gonna go ahead and put this guy back on some fresh green sticks and fry up our next fillets. And while those are cooking, we're gonna start in on our baked clay method. I'll show you guys how it works. It's time to go ahead and add our next fillet. Perfect. These fillets are cooking up real nice. They've been on less than a minute and they're already turning white. That's great. While these are cooking, we're gonna go ahead and start prepping for our clay baked fish, and I'll show you guys how that works. So here's our clay that we got. So get a nice big flat piece of clay like this. Make it slightly bigger than the fish you're trying to cook. And it doesn't have to be terribly thick. You're not trying to make a brick, but thick enough that there's a little bit of insulation and this won't just crack right off. So you want a little bit of substance to it. And again, you want it a little bit bigger than the size of the fish you're trying to cook. Here's the first of our fish. We're just gonna set him right in there like so. All right. Now we'll take and just meld these together. And it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. And then we'll just try to seal the outside. All right, so this guy is sealed. Nice little pie there. We'll go ahead and do the same with the second one, and then we'll get them in the coals. Our second fillets are ready, so I'm gonna pull these off the fire. We're gonna eat those, and then we'll put these clay ones in and cook those. That is so good. With a little fish like this, leaving the skin on and leaving the rib bones on, you save so much meat. If you're trying to cut away and just have meat, yeah, I mean, you can do it, but you end up with these tiny, thin little fillets versus this way, and you max out the meat, you get it all. You can eat around the skin, you can eat the skin if you want. It's totally good to eat. That is good. All right, and this is our last fillet that we've cooked this way. Grilling fish on an open fire like this, you get kind of this nice smoky, almost barbecue flavor. It's delicious. I'm 2 bluegill in, halfway through the fish, and so I've eaten all the fillets, and now it's on to the baked clay method. Here goes nothing. Keep these guys a little bit vertical. If I were to just lay them down flat in the bottom of this, it would just totally kill the fire. And there might be enough eminent heat in the walls of this fire pit by now and in the coal bed in the bottom that it would be able to bake them. But I honestly want to be able to cook the top as well. And so I laid them in vertically like so, and I'm gonna put some fuel on top, get a nice fire going on top, and then those coals will kind of just naturally level down on the very top of this too. And so hopefully we'll get a more even cooking if we cook from the top and the bottom. A lot of this wood I'm using is nicely dried mulberry. It's a really pretty hard wood and really a lot of heat in it. It's a good fuel wood. All right, so these fish in the clay are now in the fire, and with the positioning, it's very critical that you don't block up the air intake. This thing is sucking air through that tunnel, And that's the only way, really, that this fire is getting the most of its oxygen, at least. It might get a little bit from just the ambient outside, but the vast majority of the air that's feeding this fire is coming through that air intake tunnel. So don't block that up. And you can see I've kind of just slotted these fish in vertically so that I didn't just put them flat down, because that would just totally kill the fire and the coal bed. Put them in kind of vertically, and then make sure you leave a channel. As to when these things are done, they say once the clay starts to crack significantly, then it's a pretty good indicator that the clay has kind of fired into a primitive brick. You can take them off then, crack into them, and the fish inside should be pretty much done. It's not an exact science, but we still have quite a ways to go on this. So for now, I'm just gonna go get some fuel, fill this fire pit up with fuel, let it burn down so the coals just kind of evenly distribute over these clay fish, and hopefully they cook pretty evenly. So the fire is burned down pretty much entirely to coals, and you guys, this is absolutely perfect. This is exactly what we're going for. We just have a nice bed of coals pretty much built all the way up to the top level of that clay, and I'm just going to expose a little bit of it. You can hear that clay. It's starting to sound like brick, and we're not going to expose it quite yet, because I think the inside probably needs some more cooking, but the outside is getting to that consistency that we want. And man, this fire is absolutely blasting hot. You can see down here maybe that down at the intake there, look at that. The soil itself, the dirt there, is literally red hot. It's glowing orange. That soil has been turned into brick, essentially. And this is a really, really efficient way to do this. We're basically just using that heat that's stored in the walls here, you know, like that there is red hot, and the rest of this is all super hot. And so it's like an oven down in there, essentially. And so we're baking these fish in the clay. And yeah, this is really fun, you guys. I'm excited to try these. I hope it turns out well, and I have a good feeling about it. The fire's burned down to pure coals now. There's no more sticks, no more flames, no more open fire. It's pure coals, and there is no more smoke coming out. There was a little bit before, but now there's absolutely no smoke. And you guys, from a distance, this fire just disappears. This thing is basically just gonna bake like this for maybe another 10 minutes. It's hard to say, really. I mean, it's kind of guesswork at this point. What we can do is try to expose the coals a little bit and get a look at the side of one of these guys. All right, there is one little crack forming on the side of this one, and let's just do the sound test. All right, that sounds basically like a rock. It sounds like a brick, and that's really what it is at this point. We're gonna give it another maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then we're gonna take these out and crack into them and enjoy some delicious baked fish. All right, we're calling these things. We'll take the first one out and break into it, see how it is. Yeah, you can see it's essentially it's just one big brick. There's a big crack down the middle, and both the sound and those cracks tell you, and the fact that it's just this one solidified mass, this thing is definitely done. All right, let's go ahead and crack this thing open. There's no really easy way to do this. Oh, there you are. Look at that. This thing took the skin right with it, and that is absolutely done. Just nice white flaky fish in there. The trick really is getting to it without burning yourself, and so it's kind of a process, kind of finger food, half stick or fork food. We'll do our best, and let's give this thing a try. Let's give this a try. That looks amazing. Here goes nothing. That is good. It's crazy. It's actually really different than grilling these things on a rock. But it's not like you're tasting clay. They don't taste earthy. You can tell that it's been cooking its own juices. That is really tasty. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the glorious thing about baking fish whole like this, is that the bones just come out intact, and then everything you're left with is meat, essentially. There's some nice meat right there. That is tasty stuff. Look at that. That's all meat from up in the forehead. Everything that you'd miss if you had cleaned this the conventional way into fillets. That's a huge piece of meat right there. That's gonna be delicious. It is. That is so good. I love this way of cooking fish. It's really just flavorful. You can tell it's been cooking in its own juices. It doesn't have any sort of off taste. You don't taste the clay or anything like that. It's you're essentially, what you're doing is steaming the fish. So I finished the first one. You can see what I'm left with. Basically just bones, and then almost like fossilized imprints. There's a fin right there. There's some scale. There's, I think that's a fish eye in there. These things are essentially rock now. Somebody's gonna find them in a few hundred years and think that they're real fossils, but they're not. They're just the leftovers from dinner. Oh, look at this. You guys, that is why doing fish this way is such a good idea. You basically take the skeleton out like that. Everything else that you're left with is meat, and you're not wasting a morsel of the meat. Even the cheeks, up in the forehead, you know, down in the tail, places that you just lose meat, right along the bone. Everywhere that you lose meat when you fillet these guys, you save all of it by baking it in clay like this. If you're in a situation where protein is scarce and you do happen to catch some little bluegill like this is the way you want to cook them, because you're not wasting a scrap of it. That is beautiful. Oh yeah. There you go, guys. That's our second baked fish, and I'm about to dig into this guy. I'm excited. Oh yeah, look at that. That is so delicious. That is a great way of cooking fish. Well, I'm gonna shut the camera off and just enjoy the rest of this feast. All right, we're all done with our fish dinner. That was absolutely amazing. That was so much fun, you guys, and 2 great ways to cook fish over a really great way to make fire, the Dakota fire pit. And the nice thing is, once we're done here with all of our clay, it's easy cleanup. I'll do the dishes. Well, there we go. It's basically leveled off, and in a few weeks the weeds will have grown back and you'll never be able to tell that we had our Dakota fire pit right there. Thanks to you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little adventure, and I hope you can join me on the next one. I promise I am working on some other videos. The big one right now that I'm working on is I'm building a tandoor oven, and I'm really excited to finish that one off. Right now the oven is curing, and so pretty soon it should be up and running, and then I can get that video online for you guys. But thanks for joining me, and we'll see you guys next time.